Hi, welcome everyone to our second webinar in the series. Today we are going to be looking at the toy industry. For those who are joining for the first time, welcome. For those who are joining us for the second time, thank you very much for coming back. My name is Maurice Wheeler. I am the Managing Director at We Are Family. We Are Family is Europe's leading network of kids and family marketing agencies. I'm going to be one of the moderators, and my fellow moderator is my Spanish colleague, Borja.
Hi, Mo. Thank you so much. Borja here from Full Moon, Spain. You will all notice that you're on mute, so if you have any question, please do go to the Q&A function and leave a question. So we will get to them at the end, okay?
We're going to be recording these sessions, so we'll share that recording with you afterwards. So you don't need to furiously take notes. Please sit back, relax. It's going to be approximately 40 minutes long, and we've got some incredible panelists joining us today. We have John Baulch from the Toy World magazine, who is publisher and editor.
We also have Ken Goodisson from Jakks, their senior marketing manager. So maybe for those who are new in the toy industry, please let me introduce the current global features. So the toy industry sales within this first quarter of the year has increased their sales in 11%. So Australia experienced the highest percentage with this 11th, with Germany with the 8%, UK with the 2%, and so with little differences by country. Consumers in lockdown turned up to games and puzzles. That's a reality more than any other subcategory. So and looking at the top gaining toy properties across these markets, the largest are Disney Frozen, the Star Wars, the Toy Story, Pokemon, and the Lego Star Wars.
A lot is going on in the toy industry, and actually I'm probably going to come to you first, John. From, we hear these numbers, some of the numbers that Borja was sharing. So some people are experiencing great growth. But then we also hear, for example, I think a couple of days ago, Ruby's, the fancy dress, people announced that they were going into Chapter 11. So it's not all positive news, it's not all negative news. Could you give us a bit of a background? What's the reality that you're seeing behind some of these numbers?
Sure. Well, I think the first thing is obviously that we need to keep a sense of perspective here. There have been some reports suggesting that Q1, we've seen a slight increase across the global toy industry. So Q1 obviously is January to March. Now, towards the end of Q1, we'd started to see some impact at retail of the lockdown. So certain countries had certain stores closing. The real impact of lockdown is more likely to be seen in the Q2 numbers. So April, May, we don't obviously know what's going to happen with June yet, but I think therefore we have to keep context in mind when talking about these increases. It's a quiet time of the year generally for toys. There's usually a small spike around Easter, but generally 50% of toys are sold in the run-up to Christmas, the last couple of months. So you are looking at a relatively low base here in terms of certain category sales. So inevitably that can skew the data. So yes, it's well documented that, for example, games and puzzles has performed incredibly well. But at this time of year, games and puzzles would not normally be considered to be a big seller. A lot of parents have bought that ahead of the lockdown, knowing that their kids would need to be entertained and need to be kept amused during that lockdown. We've seen other categories such as art and craft, educational toys, STEM, because of course many parents are coping with the huge challenge of homeschooling, and some outdoor toys, particularly those that can be used in the garden, because again, parents are looking at what they can do to keep their kids amused, so that either they can carry on working themselves, or at least so their kids don't go crazy in lockdown. But the key thing to remember here is that it's impossible to shift the kind of numbers of toys when all of the physical stores are closed. So I think whilst there are some bright spots, it's important not to get too carried away here, because in the next quarter, you will really see the impact of all the stores having closed on the numbers, which will, across the board, I'm sure, be going very much into negative territory.
Oh, interesting. Thank you, John. Ken, does this ring true in what you're seeing?
I think in general, even in my past employment with Hasbro, you would see small peaks throughout the year, on games, and especially nostalgic games and games that have been around since the 1950s and 60s, NB classics. And we would always put marketing mechanics behind whenever the families were together. Anything that is storable and portable and that can be put away very, very easy, and as quickly as it got out of the box, brilliant. And that's normally what a game is. It's normally the only sort of time that mum and dad and kids will spend time together. It's over a game, and you'll get that during holidays, Easter, not more or less summer because everyone's out, but around the Christmas period. And I guess when you get such a lockdown, those things come true again, and so you will see a peak. Yes, probably bought pre-lockdown, but also bought online, and you'll find that a lot of retailers will make sure that they keep those key lines in stock in the right areas to service the e-commerce sites. You'll tend to find other areas of the business, other categories, newer items that we're probably launching this year that haven't proven their worth won't be available for online. But you can look at the outdoor, like trampolines, or it could be swing balls. It could be classics like that every single year that sell in and out. They will be prioritized online, and they will continue to drive. And games, board games, those classics will continue to perform as well, as long as people are locked down. But yes, as John says, Q1 is all about shipping for that spring period. There hasn't been much shipments going out the door to fulfill outdoor, and those Q2 numbers are going to suffer. So yeah, we'll see that very shortly.
John, one of the things that the toy industry relies quite heavily on are big licenses, and particularly big event-driven licenses. So that's obviously, a lot of that's all turned on its head. We've seen things like Trolls, things like Scooby-Doo. Both of those have moved into a new premium VOD window. How do you think that's going to have an impact on the toy industry, this move from the big theatrical releases to a home on-demand release?
Again, I think it's important to bear in mind that was a short-term reaction to a situation that nobody could have foreseen, and hopefully is not something that's ever going to be repeated. I mean, clearly the challenge that Universal had with Trolls was that product had already shipped to retailers. So if they had taken the decision to postpone the movie either until later this year or more likely to 2021, which is what's actually happened with quite a lot of the movies, then that merchandise was already sitting in stores, and it wouldn't have had the key driver, the movie, to actually sort of cause a sales uplift. So I think that what Universal did was absolutely the right strategy in the short term, because it was too late to recall the product was there in store, so they've made the movie available on demand. By all accounts, they've had good uptake, and that, I think, has certainly helped retailers and helped licensees with stock. Whether or not I think that this is going to be a model post the pandemic crisis is another conversation in time. And I think you've seen a lot of other movie houses take the decision, rather than releasing direct to video, to actually postpone the movie, because in their view, the movie was made to be seen on a big screen and not on the small screen. And I think if you hadn't shipped product into the marketplace, it was an equally viable strategy to just push the reset button, push pause, and come back to the movie next year, and actually then have a better shot at getting good viewers and selling more merchandise. I think the Trolls situation was very much a short-term reaction, rather than something that we should necessarily assume will become the norm in future.
So you don't, sorry to interrupt there, so you don't see, for example, this premium VOD window being something that's, it's not part of the new norm, if you like. You see this as just a way of getting us through, almost like the fact that the stock had shipped. That's why we have this, and you don't see that being something that's going to be the future.
Well, I think the interesting reaction came from the two largest movie theatre chains in the US, who both very openly and very clearly communicated to Universal, but they also made sure that this communication got into the public domain so that other movie producers like Disney and Warner would have seen it. They made it clear that if that was Universal's future strategy, that they would not show Universal's movies in their theatres. Now, this is very much a negotiated gambit. I don't necessarily think that it would come to that, but I think obviously movie theatres see the need to, actually sort of protect their own business modus operandi. So from their perspective, the last thing that they want to happen is lots of movies to go directly to SVOD or DVOD or whatever, and they certainly, even the idea of releasing it simultaneously in movie theatres and download is going to impact movie theatre attendance, etc. So I think that this is a much bigger conversation for what happens after we can reduce the social distancing measures, for when we can actually go back to cinema. But of course, as yet, we don't really know when that's going to be.
That's true. So Ken, what about game licenses? This is an area that it's really thriving, and you have a few games licenses from Sonic to Super Mario. How are these being affected?
Yeah, I think, we just talked previously about the lockdown and traditional games having a benefit of that, of families being together. You also see that with online free games as well, and console games such as Sonic and Nintendo, because again, that's what mums and dads used to play with when they were a kid. So they love spending time with their kids playing these games right now. So, and also if you look at older games like Call of Duty or Fortnite or Apex Legends, anything like that, and you look at the barometers, and the barometers are sites like Twitch, and you look at the broadcasters who are videoing themselves on certain game levels, it's up 30-40%. So there are a lot more people now playing games online, and that trickles down into merchandise. So obviously we are the master toy rights for Nintendo and Sonic, and we're having an unbelievable year, and again, as I said, they are still being prioritized online for sales, so they are actually tracking very well right now. And you can compare these two movies, where there's going to be such a bottleneck now in 21 of all the postponed movies, those that don't go to VOD but get pushed out to 21. How is any retailer meant to maximize each of these movies as they come through? So what you need now are these stable brands, stable boys brands. Well, they could be girls brands, but more or less they are boys gaming brands that have now solidified themselves in the boys aisle. And they are just as much an entertainment brand as what any other boys brand has been over the last 5 or 10 years. So it will be there to compete against your Star Wars, your Marvel, because each of these games like Mario or Sonic have games releases every quarter. And these are like mini movie releases in themselves in terms of the weight of consumers that they pull.
And keeping with you for a second there, do you see that people are going to be changing the types of licenses? You mentioned that we're going to have a bottleneck in the movie space or the big event launches space probably for another 18 months until things start to settle themselves out. Do you see, from a strategy of someone like yourself who's out there trying to find the right sort of IP licenses, do you think your strategy will change? Are you going to be looking for more gaming licenses or long-term perennial licenses? Obviously, you guys have Disney Princesses, which isn't necessarily reliant on a big film launch. Do you think things like YouTube, or as you say, gaming, do you think those sorts of licenses are going to become more appealing because they're not relying on the big events? Or do you think people are thinking, this is a once in a lifetime scenario in here, we shouldn't be planning for this happening every 2 years? What's your opinion on the changing demand for different licenses?
I think the demand has been changing for a couple of years now. Kids are absorbing content in different ways. It's not just from a movie. It's not really just from animation or Nickelodeon or what have you. It is from a game. It is from Netflix. It's from YouTube, or it might be from a book. So I think you may see companies now start to look in a different ways, especially if they think their retailers are going to be risk adverse, and really jumping in heavy with 2 feet for a movie that they know has got a competing movie 3 weeks after it and another one 3 weeks after it. They might want to go for these stability ones. But a lot of these brands from publishing or pay-per-view TV, they're unknown and they do need a few years of bedding in. So you've got to watch these things like a hawk, follow them. And one of them, for instance, is Gigantosaurus, is one that we've just signed. And again, that has history from book sales, over 500,000 books sold in the UK. Now, it happens to have been sold free to air right across Europe, so that obviously does help. But I think, if you look at other companies like Lego, where they've gone out and done sets on Stranger Things, you're starting to see different steps, baby steps into this new world of non-movie, non-animated brands, taking chances on gaming, publishing, and pay-per-view.
John, I guess it's probably the same sort of question to you. I mean, do you see the types of licenses that businesses are looking for? Do you see that, as Ken was saying, that's actually just almost a natural evolution of how things are moving at the moment? Or do you see the current situation speeding things up or giving us a jump on anything?
Well, I think Ken raised a couple of really good points. I think one I would definitely agree with is the risk aversion from retailers. I think they are going to want very solid rationale in future going forward in terms of which licenses they're going to back. I think, again, Ken made an extremely valid point about the logjam next year of movies, because, of course, you've now got half or 2/3 of the 2020 movies, plus all of the movies that were originally slated to come out in 2021. And we know that there's always been a challenge for retailers when it comes to movie licenses because of the timing and actually a relatively short window of opportunity for retailers to maximise sales. If that window of opportunity gets even shorter because movies will be coming along in quick-fire succession, then that is certainly going to give retailers some difficult choices to make. And I think this is where classic characters, classic properties that are well known and have got good, solid entertainment that is reaching people in lots of different ways. So TV and YouTube and all of the other different ways that kids consume content, then I think there is a sort of, almost that's a safety net, rather than, as Ken says, taking a risk on something is going to be something that retailers think twice about in the sort of post-pandemic period. I've spoken to a couple of retailers recently, and you definitely get the sense that they are using caution as the way they're going to proceed on every level. They're going to be cautious about numbers. They're going to be cautious about overexposure in terms of stock. They're going to be cautious about overexposing to unproven ranges or characters, etc. So I think we may well go through a period of 12 to 18 months here where classics, the well-known, the established brands become that sort of safe haven for licensees and for retailers. And I think you will see a little bit less risk-taking in at least in the short-term aftermath.
Yeah, here, us in Spain, as an agency, we are shifting all the activations for our toy customers that we had during the year, and then we are transforming them into a phygital experience, no? A multi-platform content where to enjoy, where kids can enjoy the content, the features, and all that universe, no? So in this retail, this obviously affects the activation of the point of sale. So John, how will the retail situation unpick itself? Has this shift to online become the final nail in the coffin for traditional retailers? What do you think?
No, I fundamentally would disagree with that completely. I think what we have seen is online has really come into its own in the past few months. In fact, for the toy industry as a whole, let's be honest, online retail has been an absolute godsend, because without it, many retailers' turnover would have gone to zero. So at least it has enabled them to keep trading, to keep moving stock, to keep bringing cash in, because cash is extremely important in this climate. And I think once we get through the lockdown phase and we come into the reopening phase, then online will still be really very important, because I think when this lockdown first started, there were people who perceived that as soon as it finished, everyone would rush out and it would be like a great party, and everybody would rush to the pubs and rush shopping and rush onto holidays. And of course, now with the benefit of hindsight and knowledge of this virus and the situation, I think we all now know that that's not going to happen. That when stores reopen, they will reopen gradually. There will be measures put into place, as we've seen in grocery retailers. There will need to be social distancing. People may well need to wear masks. They may well need to queue to get into the store. They will not want to spend a lot of time in the store browsing or picking up items or trying things. They will want to go into the store, they will want to get what they went in for, and they will want to get out fairly quickly. Many retailers are even going a step further and believing that people will stand outside the store with their mobile phone, they will place orders, and somebody from the store will bring it out and either give it to the customer or even maybe put it directly into the customer's car, into the car boot. So a sort of almost an immediate form of click and collect, if you like. And I think retailers realise that that is going to be the situation for a little while until we can go back to the way it was before. So online and retail ordering online ordering will be still very important. But I think something about toys lends itself to the physical store. And I think when all of this is behind us, kids will still love the magic of a toy shop. Kids will still want to go in and see all of the toys. Parents will still want to go in and choose and physically touch. So I don't think under any circumstances this is the end of physical retail. Very far from it. However, I do think it's the end of average physical retail. To survive through this, you've got to be a really good retailer, a strong trader with a strong commercial proposition. You've got to be at the top of your game, and if you are, I think there's, those retailers will absolutely survive afterwards. But I think for those retailers that have perhaps been lacking direction, for those retailers that have perhaps been struggling to this point, this is going to be very difficult for them to come through this.
Ken, on to the what happens next question, the kind of the big question that everyone's asking themselves at the moment. What does life look like beyond lockdown for the toy industry? What are the bits that you hope are gone for good, and what are the bits that you're hoping will stay around? Are there any kind of positives as well as the negatives? What does the legacy look like?
Whoa, it's a big one. I mean, number one, I think there's going to be a very early, promotional period, Black Friday or whatever. As soon as this lockdown is underway, there's going to be a fire sale. Stock is in the wrong areas. New stock is coming through for spring next year. Toy industry is like the fashion industry. Stuff has to move with the seasons. Next year, there's going to be a glut of product as well. New product that didn't make it this autumn winter that has been postponed for next year because a lot of retail would have stuck with what they know will work. They won't take any risks. So that with the movies and other IP product and whatever it might be, there is going to be a lot of product on the marketplace. I think as well, we noticed that TV advertising, certainly in Q4 last year, took a huge dip. A huge one, 30% down in terms of impacts, maybe more in some cases on certain platforms. A lot of companies were migrating now to putting maybe 50% into digital, and not just digital advertising or pay-per-click or pre-rolls, but investment in landing sites where you can really engage with the consumer before you pass them on to a retailer. I think it's going to make everyone sit up and notice now, what is that consumer marketing funnel, and how do we make sure that the brand suite follows right down that decision-making process, right down to the purchase point. So that means everything now in terms of our digital overlays, our skins, our branding has to be the same on the landing page, but also needs to be the same on the online purchasing page as well. But the online purchasing page has to step up. I think you're going to see a lot more augmented reality now on products, where you can break up and see inside how these things are put together or what components they come with, better turnaround visuals, and make these pages a mini entertainment site as well in itself. Consumers are going to expect a lot more because they've been forced down this way so far over the last 3 months.
Do you think, Baulch, just to follow up on that, do you think experiential and event-based stuff is going to be more important? From a conversion funnel perspective, that definitely was on the rise as far as toys and enabling people to have a live experience with the toy, whatever that may be. Do you see that falling by the wayside, or do you see that coming back with a vengeance because people now really want to get out and engage physically?
Yeah, do you know what, we still need frequency of purchase, so we need to invest trade marketing wise for that off shelf, that FSDU. We still need that. But at the end of the day, where we're marketing, there's so many different splendors of avenues that we need to be in, and we need to make sure that we look the business online as we do in store as well. So companies are going to step up. The competition is going to be very fierce in terms of how we stand out online and how we actually stand out in store as well. As I say, I think there's going to be a massive price push at the back end of the year, and stores are going to be a mess. That's my personal view. And I think we need to get back to basics and invest in point and sale and make sure that the brands that we know work and that are evergreen step out and take advantage of that.
John, does that matches your expectations?
I think so. I think what we have to look at here is the immediate aftermath of lockdown and what happens in the longer term. Immediately afterwards, I think experiential is going to be much harder. For example, where people have tried to include play tables in toy stores, well, those are all going to have to be taken out. Even try-me packaging, which has become, pretty much standard across the industry, is going to have to be, considered in the post-pandemic to be a little bit of a risk. If you've got 20 kids or 20 adults all going in and touching the same part of the toy, then that's not going to be particularly good for the sort of spread situation. So I think we are going to find for the rest of this year, perhaps, that shops are going to have to rethink, and I think this is where Ken is absolutely right, that journey of communicating about the product. You've almost got to lead the consumer to the point of purchase, perhaps more prior to the store, because once they get to the store, the likelihood is they're going to be going in with a fairly good idea. I think there was a survey done quite a few years ago that suggested that up to 50 or maybe 60% of toys were purchased on impulse in the store. You know, the parent went in knowing that they wanted a toy, or the adult, you know, whoever went in buying the toy knew they wanted to buy a toy, but they didn't know which specific one. I think in the short term, that figure is going to be much lower. The number of people that go in knowing exactly what they want to buy is going to increase quite significantly. So the communication journey, the communication to the consumer is going to be so important this year. They're not going to go in and buy something that they don't know. So, you know, this year more than ever, that sort of communication is going to be very, very valuable. Obviously, as we move forward, I think we all hope that we get back to a stage where experiential retailing and hands-on, and getting the kids really immersed in the product at point of purchase, you know, goes back to where it was, because I think that's a very, very important part of what creates the magic of a good toy store. I think we just have to accept that in the very short term, for the next 6 months or so, that particular strategy is going to be paused.
We've got a couple of questions coming in, and please, everybody else, send in some questions. We've got about 10 minutes left, so we should have time for at least two. One of the questions was around the point that you both made, that shops and retailers are looking to be more conservative with the sorts of brands that they buy, and they might well be going for the classics. How is that going to be impacting smaller games and smaller toy publishers, toy companies, who might not have big classic brands? Is that a very bad situation for them, or are there ways and means in which they can still thrive in the new world? John, I'll come to you first with that one, if I may.
One of the interesting things is, you know, we've obviously been trying to talk to as many suppliers as possible over the last few months, just to understand how they're coping with this period, and you know, what changes they've made. And interestingly, some of the smaller companies have actually proportionately come out of this incredibly well. There are a few small games and puzzles companies that have seen the sort of increases that they could only have dreamed about, prior to this situation occurring. So it isn't necessarily, maybe within licensing, I think that has a point, but I think within the broader toy community, there are a lot of small toy companies that actually produce really good product, good games, good puzzles. STEM is a category, educational and STEM, which very few of the very large global corporate toy companies are that involved with. Most of the suppliers are actually small and medium suppliers. A lot of the outdoor suppliers, same sort of thing. Art and craft definitely is a real mixture of small, medium and large companies. So there are opportunities for smaller companies, absolutely, definitely. And those companies tend to be more flexible. They tend to be a bit more nimble, a bit more reactive. And I think we've certainly seen it both on the retail side and on the toy company side, that some of the smaller companies were very quick to pivot and change their business operation so that they could still find a way to navigate through this. Whereas some of the larger companies have found that inevitably harder because of the sheer scale and the time scales that they're used to working with. So it's not all bad news at all for small and medium companies, definitely not.
Ken, anything to add to that, or has John summed it up nicely?
I think John summed that one up perfectly. And I think everyone's going to love their corner shop a lot more than what they did, and maybe their local toy master or local independent toy shop. And I think these are where these smaller players do very well in as well. So that's where they're going to see their strengths come from.
We had another question, which you kind of touched on there, John, which was around educational type toys and products, and actually be interested to hear your opinion on this, John. Ken, last week, for example, when we were speaking to Moonbug, they were talking about how they hope that content in the future, and it looks like content in the future will more likely have an educational flavour to it, more than it does this time 6 months ago, because of the need for education in the home. Do you see that going through for toys as well? Do you see there being, as John was mentioning, more STEM-based toys or educational-based toys coming through? Is that a new trend that we could expect to see? Ken?
I was Emily, sorry. I think it's just very cyclical. You get certain categories that are up 1 year and come back 5 years later. Certainly for ourselves, we're in that category with iClops, which is a handheld telescope which can zoom in 800 times. So we have clout in this area, but we're in and out every 5 years, and we tend to find that this category comes up with us as well. And normally it tries to fit within the entertainment industry as well. Everyone knows the movie slate. I think everyone will make decisions to fit in when that slate looks a little bit weaker than what it has done the year before. And yes, I think it may see a resurgence over the next few years with a lot of home learning that mums and dads have had to do. Maybe they've now realised what the education system is, what the syllabus is, and what it's like to teach, and how hard it is. And crikey, don't I know? And maybe that might change their minds in terms of what product they want to buy in the future. More educational based, scientific based, biology could be after what's happened based product.
I think for me, one of the keys is there's a great phrase, edutainment, and I think Ken sort of touched on it there really. Education was important, but the kids have got to enjoy it while they're doing it. So, in a way, it's sort of stealth learning. They're learning things, but they're not thinking of it in the same way they would think of a school lesson. They're learning things, but having fun and enjoying it while doing it. And I think those are the products that we're really seeing come to the fore during this period. And I think Ken is absolutely right. I think if kids show an interest in them and parents realise that actually they could be quite beneficial, this could have a positive impact on that particular category going forward. Although obviously most parents are really hoping that schools open again very, very soon, I'm sure.
Yes, indeed. Thank you. Thank you very much. That's all we've got time for on the questions and answers, but a couple of things I wanted to do just at the end there. I'm going to be sending everyone, all the participants, a survey, and I'd love to find out how we can improve and how we can make these sessions better. And we've got lots more still to come, so we're still learning. So please, if you get the opportunity, we'd love to have you fill in that survey.
Yeah, thank you. And don't forget that the following week, we have a session looking at education, one of the kids' landscape pillars. So, and it's changing role in the life of kids, the parents and brands. So we will have Leon Smith, from the Chief Customer Officer from the Global Educational Resources Company, Twinkle. Also, we have the Dr. Benny Park from Klett-Mint, an education communication agency in Germany. And maybe we are confirming some others the following days.
Please remember, if you have any marketing requirements, we've got an incredible agency network ready to take your call. But I'd like to end by saying thank you so much to John Baulch from Toy World Magazine. Thank you very much, John.
Morris.
And thank you to Ken Goodisson from Jakks Pacific. Thank you so much, Ken. And obviously, thank you, Baulch.
Thank you all. It's been a pleasure. So we are seeing each other next Tuesday, same timing. And we hope you have a great week. And thank you so much for getting connected. Bye.
Thank you.
All the best.
Bye.